From right here in the Caribbean, he has created a global marketplace to connect owners of tried and true internet-based businesses who want to sell to buyers who are interested in buying those businesses as long as they're willing to spend less than $10,000 US. Here to tell us why Tiny still has value, let's meet Stephen Campbell of Tiny Acquisitions. We are going to start at the beginning, right?
Okay.
So, kind of tell me, did you feel like you were super entrepreneurial minded when you started out? Like, what was your start like?
I would say no.
Okay.
And yes, because my mom, I think, has entrepreneurial roots. She would tell me, when I was much younger, how she would sell things, buy things to sell at work, while she was at work. Both my parents are civil servants, but I think I saw her doing a lot of entrepreneurial stuff, a lot of network marketing and so on. So I always had that inclination. She would show me stuff, and a lot of it was on the computer. So I think I had that in the back of my mind, but my path wasn't entrepreneurial.
So, I mean, she's showing you things on the computer. Do you feel like you were super techie to begin with, or how did you get involved in that?
I wouldn't say I was techie, because I remember in high school, I had challenges with like lunch money and so on, and to solve that problem, my mom would bake like rock cakes, and I would sell it in class, $10, $15, and so on. And that was, looking back, that was a part of the entrepreneurial experience that I grew up with. So it wasn't necessarily techie, but I had a knack for solving problems. Yeah.
I swear you're gonna say burning CDs, because
no, not at all.
That used to be a thing for a lot of people though. But okay, all right. So you were always like sort of solving problems, however it is that you feel like you could, right? Yeah. So is this the first project that you've ever encountered? Like, what was your first project like?
Okay, so
like large scale, not the rock cake selling, but
large scale. I wouldn't even say this is large scale, no.
Okay.
But it's the biggest thing I have worked on so far.
Okay.
So I would say I got a start in something somewhat more commercial. After university in 2015, I came home, finished UA, studied in Trinidad, finished UA, came back to Jamaica, had 6 months to just think before I, got a job. And in that time, I started a lunch business, a lunch delivery business.
Okay.
Right. So on a Friday, I would, take orders in the week, and on a Friday I would deliver.
Okay.
So
you were cooking?
No. So actually, I started with a friend. We were in a network marketing business together, and we kind of launched out to lunches to say, let's try go out there, knock on doors, and see if anybody wanted lunch in, Kingston Business District. So we'd go to the bookshop, the offices in Kingston, and ask persons, do you want lunches? We're delivering on Friday. And my friend at the time, his aunt was a cook, and so she would prepare, and we would just deliver on Fridays. Eventually, that partnership broke up, and I said, you know what, I'm going to launch on my own. So I had another friend whose father was a chef.
Okay.
And I worked out a deal to say, here, I'll give you this split of the revenue, and I'll take this, and they agreed. And I did that for the first week. I did really well. I think I made like $25,000 or something like that. Yeah, so $25,000 was a good amount of money for me at the time. And I did it for a week, and I was like, I need to automate this process, because I was going out Monday to Thursday, knocking on doors.
Sweating.
Yeah, I mean, going out, it was rough.
Okay.
Because I didn't live in Kingston, so I would have to travel into Kingston and try to sell tickets for Friday. So I thought of doing a Google sheet Google spreadsheets in the cloud, and I would send that to offices. So I would have one person that was really interested in the business, and I would say, here's the link to the Google sheet. Try to get as much person on the list as possible. So that was the second week, and in doing that, I came up with like 3 names in total. So it wasn't viable because I couldn't automate it, and I didn't want to spend a lot of time walking around. So after that, I kind of exited, and yeah, that was basically the first business venture I would say I did. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So you're out here always trying to figure out how you're gonna solve problems. I saw that you describe yourself as an engineer trying to solve real world problems. I want to pull you right up because you skimmed over the fact that you said you went to UE in Trinidad. What did you study, Stephen?
So I studied chemical and process engineering, Bachelor of Science in chemical and process engineering, 3 years. Yeah, I have a degree in that, and I practiced for a short while as well.
Okay, so you did. Is it something that you loved? Why did you pick it? Because you're not in a space now. How did you transition?
Okay.
Or if you've considered yourself transition from being a chemical engineer.
So let me tell you how I got there first. My father, who is a property manager, was always interested in land surveying and civil engineering. So he told me about civil engineering and showed me a newspaper article that there was a shortage of civil engineers in Jamaica. And I had that newspaper article cut out in my room for a couple of years.
Wow.
And that was what I was aiming towards. In maybe third form, I had a chance to do an internship with a civil engineering firm. And my experience there kind of veered me from civil engineering. It was, I have a lot of civil engineering friends, but to me it wasn't very fun.
Okay.
So I still wanted to do engineering because I understood that was a nature I had. I wanted to solve problems. So I found that I had a knack for physics and chemistry. I was very good in chemistry and very interested. So in sixth form, when colleges would come to advertise programs, I saw chemical and process engineering, and I became interested in that. And I made up my mind that I would do that.
Okay.
So that's the start, right? I did it, and I enjoyed it. Based on what it was, that was me. It was a perfect career path for me. Okay, so the transition came when I actually worked in the field and realized that my perspective of what I wanted to do as a chemical and process engineer, wasn't what the reality was of it.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
Okay. All right, so you did that. You said you enjoyed it for what it was worth. When did you start to transition? When did you start to feel like a transition was necessary? And how did you end up in development? Okay,
so the transition kind of started in my mind.
Okay.
When I realized that the field that I was in and what I was required to do, in conjunction with family life, my wife is a medical doctor, and both of our jobs are kind of demanding, that looking 5 years down the line, I didn't see where I could continue, or both of us could continue in the same way and have a balance, a work-life balance. So that transition came to my mind first. And then I had a lot of issues at work. It was very stressful for me. And I think I had a mental breakdown at one point, so I started thinking about what it is I could do to balance myself in the job for a while until I could figure out a next path. So I was applying to jobs, I was looking for other ways, and I wasn't getting through. So I thought entrepreneurship.
Okay.
So I realized I couldn't even think when I was at work. Being in a job that was demanding I had to be focused on the job. When I got home, I was so tired, I couldn't even think. So I made up my mind that I needed some time to think. And that time to think would look like me resigning from my job.
That's a major step to take. You're married, so you have, you know, a household and somebody else to consider and all of that. How did you decide to make that step? Like, what pushed you to say, all right, I'm gonna push the button right now? Because you've been thinking about it, right? But what pushed you to say, all right, this is it, I'm done?
I think it would have been the approval of my wife, right?
Okay.
So I was thinking about it for a year, one full year, before I actually made the step. Because it's not just a decision I could take without much thought. So I told her how I was feeling about it, and you know, she was supportive. She was adamant that I would need a plan. So I did a plan, and I gave her. I did a plan. I gave her the plan, and you know, I was still at work. And then it just came to me one day. I said, "This is my last. This is my last year." And I told her, and she was like, "Okay, yeah. Do what you love. Go for what is in your mind." And after that point, I think that very day I submitted my resignation, and I gave them notice, and then I left after that.
Okay, free at last, free at last.
Free.
Thank God Almighty, free at last. All right, but I mean, the resignation is not. It is a beginning. But how did you get into, you know, dev? Specifically, you could have chosen another line of work. You could have decided to become a marketer or something. You could have been anything. So why did you choose dev, and how did you kind of take the steps to make that happen?
So I was thinking about dev before I left, right? And why dev? Because I could work from home. I could work remotely, and I could still build things. So I watched this YouTube video before I even got that job, and I had searched for the video. It was, you know, how did these young billionaires or millionaires achieve their wealth? Good.
How did they achieve their wealth?
How did these young millionaires, successful entrepreneurs, tech entrepreneurs achieve their wealth? And I realized every single one of them built an app, and it was acquired by a big company, and they got funds, and they leveraged that to do something else. So it became obvious to me that it had to be something in tech, because I couldn't spend, you know, leaving my job. I couldn't go back to study at that time to find something, you know, go on another path for a couple of years. So maybe I could build something out, you know, and have an exit and leverage that and move to the next step. So dev for me was also a way that I could do entrepreneurship without investing much time, like years getting a degree again, and much study. So
much study. I mean, development is coding and all of these technicalities. Like, how then were you able to get the skill set? Because it's not something you can't just roll over and be like,
so I think, and up to now, I wouldn't say I have the skill set.
Okay.
Because I'm into NoCode more.
What's NoCode?
Okay.
Before you get into the details, just generally, what is NoCode?
Okay, NoCode is just a movement where you can leverage code via platforms and build the end product without writing the code yourself.
So this would be like WordPress.
Yeah, WordPress.
What
and
else?
You know, Airtable is one as well that deals with databases. You have Bubble, you have AppGyver, Webflow, a lot of these tools that enable you to build the end product, and it can be complex applications as well without writing the code yourself. Mark, your code still runs in the background. There's somebody that's writing the code, but not me, right?
Right.
Yeah, so that's NoCode, right? So Dev, no. A lot of work still has to go into learning, how to connect the parts.
Right.
And
how were you able to learn that?
Time.
Okay.
I had to put in the time.
Where are you putting in the time?
So here's the thing. After I left,
okay.
I tried to find myself first.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
I did a month of nothing, just feeling around,
Fantastic.
doing music.
Right.
I played the piano. I tried to get a few gigs in production, just feeling around what I really liked. And that path would take me much longer than trying to build something. So I started feeling around with WordPress, building little sites, getting my practice. And I had indications that this was the path when someone approached me to do a job for them, like a client. And I was like, yeah, I could do this. So I spent a lot of time practicing, building stuff for myself, which wasn't necessarily production grade or anything that I could put out there, but it's just like projects to get my practice in.
Right, okay.
And most of it was WordPress initially.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So practice to get into your dev transition. We are here on this couch for a reason, because obviously something worked out, something clicked. You have created a market space where you have people who have tried and true small internet-based projects being able to sell to larger people. Same thing that you saw, right? But before we even get to exactly what Tiny Acquisition is, we are in October 2021. This idea came to you not a year ago, not 2 years ago, but April 2021, right? And you have a fully launched, fully developed product essentially. Yeah, you're iterating, of course, as things change and improve, but you have a fully functional product. Before we even start talking about Tiny Acquisition and the cool stuff that you're doing with that, Twitter? What was the problem? First of all, what was the problem that you saw?
Okay, so being in the no-code space, it's really, no-code is just on Twitter, to be very honest.
Okay.
A lot of niches, they're just on Twitter.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. So Twitter is not
Twitter,
just such trash. Okay.
No, Twitter is an underestimated platform. What I observe in Jamaica is that it's just to vent your thoughts and things like that. But in other spaces, it's really for business. And I discovered that getting into the no-code space, where there were these, what we call makers, creatives that, they don't necessarily know code, how to code, but they can build websites, they can design, they can do apps, they can do mobile apps, everything like that. I would see them building apps and talking about it for 3 months, and then you wouldn't hear anything about it again, and then they would be talking about something new. And I did a fellowship at On Deck. On Deck is like this hub where you can do fellowships and learn from a community of persons in the same niche. So I did a no-code fellowship, and what I learned there are attributes of these persons that have that maker characteristic. I learned that this is just how they are. You create something and you get bored. I just want to move on.
Right.
So I was like, these creations cost time. You're leveraging an app that delivers a service to allow you to create this thing. You pay for the subscription, right? That's a cost. How can this creation that you abandon become valuable? And that kind of sparked the idea, because I was having that same problem. I would keep on moving. I would be moving from one thing to the next, and not liquidating what I was doing before. So I kind of tested the audience on Twitter to see if others were having this same problem. Yeah.
And I mean, we can actually go back and see the tweet ourselves if you're interested in looking. Like literally, it lit up, right?
Yeah, yeah.
What was the feedback like?
So persons were saying, you know, there are other apps out there that solve this problem, you know. But I was asking, is there an app that focuses on a small exit, you know, in terms of liquidating a project instead of trying to sell it for the value that it's worth, you know? And you had stuff that I would say you could liquidate projects there, but really and truly, they were trying to get the value for the project. So I think that niche of liquidating projects wasn't filled. So I still had confidence that it was a real problem. And there was some negative feedbacks, but there was some positive feedbacks. And I kind of wrote the positive feedbacks and delivered just as a test to see where it would go.
Okay, April. April to know you have a essentially fully functional product. Do you view Tiny Acquisition as a tool, like a SaaS tool, or are you looking at it as like a legit full-on business?
Yeah, it's a full-on business. There's definitely a business behind it. At the same time, it's a tool that's monetized, but I would say there's a working, thriving business behind Tiny Acquisition.
Okay. So a lot of times when people think about, you know, solving problems or even creating businesses, they're thinking that it is a big deal, a lot that you have to do, business plan that you have to write, concept paper, do this, do that, do that. Did you do any of that?
Up to this point, I haven't written a business plan for anything that I've been doing for the last 2 years. You know, I haven't written a business plan because really and truly, it's not that serious for me.
Okay.
I still feel fresh out of a job.
Okay.
Like I'm still trying to find what it is I'm supposed to be doing.
Okay.
But the journey is just, I'm just being carried along on the journey. So I don't have a business plan.
Okay.
But as soon as I see the project becoming serious and it necessitates certain things, I go after it. Yeah, so it's not really that serious.
Yeah.
I think that the most important thing is that I'm learning from each project and I'm continuing to improve on what I have learned in the past.
So, okay, so in getting to the stage that you are at right now, is there anything that you prioritized or focused on when you said, all right, cool, I see where this could be a thing, or let me try out if this was a thing? What was that first thing that you took a look at or decided to focus on, if any?
Basically, engagement.
Okay.
I would say throwing an idea out there based on the feedback and the engagement that it gets, and person saying, hey, I would love to see this, or even negative feedback could be an indication that it sparks a thing in a community. So engagement is a number one for me. I mean, I don't build in the dark. I don't have an idea and in the dark saying this is the next $1 billion thing, you know, man. When I launch it out there, I mean, it's gonna be like that.
Yeah.
That doesn't work for me.
Okay.
And I don't think, based on the attention spans of everybody out there now, it's hard to do that now in the space where everything is just cut and go.
Right.
So I kind of just work with the engagement, you know. Is it good? Is it relevant? No. And I just run with it until it expires. So
when did you recognize that you were working on something that was valuable to the community that you were trying to serve?
I would say I launched it on May 31st, right?
The tweet was April, what, 30th or something, like 27?
So I took 4 weeks.
Okay.
I built it out to a point where it was fully functional. Everything could work. And within 3 days, a buyer came in and purchased a project, which was my project. Right? I had only a few projects, so I put one of my projects on as the test and did a video on that, and a buyer came in and purchased the project. I was like, this is significant. This proves to me that it was needed because I solved the problem I was having. Maybe I would solve many other person's problems. So that kind of gave me an indication that I had to continue with it.
So you got your first purchase of your very own project. How do you scale? How do you get it in front of people to start? Because a marketplace only functions if you have both buyers and sellers, right? How did you get people on your platform?
So, something incredible happened.
Okay.
Right? I was normally I'm on Twitter every day because that's basically where the business is. And someone tags me in a post, hey Stephen, prepare for some traffic, you know. Tiny Acquisitions is #1 on Hacker News, you know. And like as I saw that tweet, I got an email notification, ping, there's a traffic spike on Tiny Acquisitions. And when I looked at my analytics, like there were hundreds of persons. And it started to scale as the night went on. I mean, so many things broke. I mean, I have an email API that I use that I think gives me, I think it was 1,000 emails per month to send on that API. And like within a couple of hours it broke, and I had to upgrade the plan, but I didn't set up a notification. So emails weren't being sent out. So persons couldn't verify their sign up. And that was a huge problem because in the morning I woke up and it was like 20,000 something persons were on the site.
20,000 overnight.
Overnight. So that kind of traction, I wasn't trying to get it on Hacker News. And I would ask some customers, how did you find us? And they would say, someone told me. It's not that they saw a tweet or something. Persons were literally talking about it word of mouth. And that was crazy. So, and that started on Twitter. So I shared it on Twitter. Person started talking about it. It got on Hacker News, and then 20,000
people hit your website in less than 24 hours.
So persons found it. You know, persons found it.
Wow. I mean, good things whenever. What is it that they say? The reward for good work is more work. Right. So you have 20,000 people who have hit your website in less than 24 hours. What do you do? What's your next step?
And so at that point, we weren't monetized. So persons were posting their projects and persons could buy, but I was getting nothing. So obviously the next step was to monetize. And at that point, I had someone approach me that they wanted to do a business deal, you know, to become a business partner. So I took a couple of days, I went on vacation.
Vacay is big. It feels like every time you're about to make a next step, you take a step back and like chill.
I went on vacation to think about the deal, you know, take a break too. And, you know, I thought about the deal, worked the numbers, and submitted, and I did the deal on vacation. And I came back and started to put the team together to see how we would grow this thing. So after that, the next step was monetizing and then doing a launch and product hunt. So, and that was kind of the growth strategy, the first steps in the growth strategy. And we had some other things in the pipeline as well. So the next real step was growth. Establishing the platform as the de facto liquidating tool for tiny projects, and getting that's just the base, the base for doing that kind of business. It is a business in the mergers and acquisitions industry space, but in a way where it's just at the lower end. And I don't think a lot of businesses in that space is competing at that level right now.
Right, because you do have micro acquire, you have indie
makers.
Yeah, indie makers and stuff like that, occupying.
You have Flipper and so on, but I don't think we're really competing with them. I've seen persons post projects on Tiny Acquisitions and other places, and some of them sell on Tiny
Faster than...
Well, I don't know. I don't know, but some of them sell on Tiny, and some of them sell outside,
elsewhere.
Right? And we don't try to say once you post your project here, you can't post anywhere else.
Of course.
What is very important for me is that makers are getting that exit.
Okay. I love the fact that you did not initially focus on monetization, which is interesting because a lot of times, a lot of people, when you're getting started, it's how do you make money, right? You have managed to take something that it sounds like you were just trying out, and you were able to monetize it. What has been, outside of your website getting hit with 20,000 people in less than 24 hours, what do you feel has been your biggest challenge to date?
Biggest challenge,
yes,
I would say, is working on something, putting in the time, and not being sure that it will ever amount to anything. I mean, that 4-week period when, I did validate the idea, but I wasn't sure if it would be significant enough to make any money, right? So, and in that time, I could be working on other things.
Facts. Correct.
So that was the most challenging thing, being unsure of what it would come to. And then even after launching it out there, not monetizing it, what am I doing? Persons are selling projects and listing their projects. How do I monetize this thing? And I have bills to pay. I mean, this is something that I do full time. So that was very challenging, but eventually I solved the problem. Based on discussions with my business partner and feedback from the customers, we found a strategy to monetize, and it worked. So that solved that problem.
Okay. What do you think the biggest highlight has been? We've talked about what the major challenge has been for you. Your mental health must be amazing right now, since you were at a place where you couldn't even go home and think. How do you feel right now that you made a decision?
I feel pretty good, but it's not that I haven't had low moments where I was questioning if I made the right decision. But in those moments, when I remembered what I was going through, those moments were joyful moments. To be very honest, in comparison, it's just the truth, because I operate with a level of gratefulness every day because I get to do this, and it is successful. It is, I would say, it's successful, and I'm just remembering where I'm coming from. So it has been a lot of low moments, and I think there will be more low moments, but in those low moments, I kind of reflect on the past and say, it's not that bad.
It could be worse.
It could be worse.
Yeah.
So I think gratefulness really helps with the mental health issue.
What do you wish that what do you know now that you wish that you would have known before, or maybe a little bit earlier? Is there anything that comes to mind?
I tend not to make those claims, or I tend not to operate in I wish I had, because I think everything happens in the right time, and what I know now is the perfect time to know it now. And I still don't know so many things, but it's not the time right now. So I don't operate in I wish I had. So yeah, I think everything works in its own time.
Okay. I mean, you guys are the only ones kind of doing it in the Caribbean space, right? you are literally the first. Apologies to anybody who exists that we don't know about yet. There is still time for you. But essentially right now, you guys are the only ones doing it in the Caribbean space. Does that feel like a lot of pressure? Do people know what's going on in the Caribbean? I feel like you've gotten a lot of attention internationally. You have a Business Insider article, right? Paywalled, but I mean, good enough to be paywalled, right? How do you feel about the Caribbean space in terms of, tech and innovation?
I think there are a few persons in the Caribbean that's, hitting it and doing well, but emphasis on few, right? I think those solid persons in tech, I've seen a lot of them online. Those solid persons just remain solid, and the traction to getting a lot more people is slow. But I wouldn't even say Tiny Acquisitions is a Caribbean company.
Right.
I just live in the Caribbean. I just happen to live in the Caribbean because in 2021, there's no country really. When I'm online, if I don't put that I live in Jamaica, nobody will know.
Right.
And I'm operating a business that solves anybody's problem. I mean, I'm yet to see a Caribbean person sell something on Tiny Acquisitions.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
But I've seen persons from France.
Wow.
I've seen someone from Canada. I've seen someone from India sell on Tiny Acquisitions. So it's about not thinking about location, because I don't think location matters a whole lot now in tech.
Right.
And just executing and solving a real problem.
You have shared like a whole lot, and I think you've given a lot of people a different perspective on how it is that you can just look on resolving problems and starting businesses. I think a lot of us, based on the fact that we're in the Caribbean, sometimes we look to a local audience to serve, but it's beyond that. What's next for Tiny Acquisitions?
I would say growth.
Growth, okay.
Yeah, definitely. That's the main focus right now. I mean, we moved from, I remember tweeting about 700 users, and we're now at 1,800 users.
Okay.
And we're adding users each week. There are certain key metrics that I look at to indicate that we're heading in the right direction. And it's really growth and getting projects listed and persons acquiring the projects. But I don't have such a long-term goal. I generally don't look 2 years, 3 years. I still call it a project, you realize? So I'm like looking 3 months, where do I want to see this in the next 3 months? And I work towards that. So the main focus right now is growth.
So what's your exit strategy? I kept hearing exit, and then I exited that. So do you have an exit strategy for this? Are you selling Tiny Acquisition on Tiny Acquisition?
I'm not selling it, no.
Okay.
But I do have an exit strategy, and I do have a timeline in my mind.
Okay. No pressure, you don't have to share.
But what I'm finding is that I really love doing it. I really love working at it. It's not something that I want to give up. I remember selling that first project and seeing some of the emails coming still. We were still transitioning, and I kind of felt my heartstrings being tugged a bit because I was so emotionally connected to the project. And that's how I feel about Tiny. I think, yes, an exit is inevitable, and we've had offers as well. But for right now, I think it's just being diligent in delivering what I said Tiny was, and helping people really get an exit.
Okay. All right, so Stephen is having fun, obviously. Stephen is
basically
having a good time. So what's next for you? A Tiny project, Tiny Acquisition is one project, as you've said. What are you looking at? What are you excited about? Like, what's next for you as an entrepreneur?
I would say, continuing to improve my skills. Always reinvesting into what I know and my skill set, and continuing to solve problems because I have a lot of ideas. I mean, a whole lot of ideas, but it's just retooling myself in being able to solve those ideas, those problems that will come up, and trying to look at the bigger picture. You know, what problem do I want to solve as my life's work? You know, because these tiny acquisitions is extremely significant for this phase of my life. At the same time, I want to be solving a bigger, more grand problem. So eventually, I guess I'll get there. I don't know what it looks like now.
Right. But it'll be fun.
I'll get there. I'll get there.
Right.
Basically.
Okay. All right. Amazing. So the final question for you is, if you were to be talking to someone who is just getting started, or is thinking about starting, or just generally unsure about taking that next step, what would you tell them in a nutshell?
I would say find something that you're passionate about, and that could be seen as a negative because a passion project could involve no money,
Right.
but it's very important to work on something that you'll find the energy to work on. I can't just say, oh, I need this money right now, this business brings in a lot of money. You'll find yourself cutting corners because you don't have the energy to put in the work because you're just not passionate about it.
Yeah.
Right? So passion is one thing. I would say start small. I've seen persons try to go at some big things, trying to say we need to raise this big capital.
Right.
Tiny started with a domain name, just $8, and I leveraged tools without spending much money, and then testing the idea to get it to where it needs to be. So I don't think businesses or ideas need a whole lot of capital up front and a lot of energy, but it's just getting to the point where it makes sense, it's viable product, proving that it's viable before putting in that energy into it, and starting small.
So if it's one thing that we can take away, or I've definitely taken away from talking to Stephen Campbell of Tiny Acquisitions, is tiny too has value. Businesses can be built in 6 months and still be successful as long as you have passion, you have purpose, and you build a product that people want. Start small, start with what you have, but most importantly, make sure you start.